Hello everyone, welcome to ICRA IAS. So today we are going to be covering our weekly current affairs compilation, that is from the date 3rd of January to 9th of January. So the first news is about the census. Okay, why it was a news? So the first phase है census का and the collection of details to update the National Population Register, that is NPR, have been postponed at least till September. मैंडेटरी रिक्वायरमेंट्स क्या है सेंसस के लिए? तो फ्रीजिंग ऑफ द बाउंड्री लिमिट्स ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव यूनिट्स, freezing of boundary limits of administrative units, that is boundaries of districts, sub-district, tehsil, talukas, police stations, at least 3 months prior is a prerequisite for conducting the census. For census 2021, all the changes between January 1, 2010, that is after the date of freezing of the boundaries for census 2011, up to the date of freezing of the boundaries for forthcoming exercise presently up to June 30th, 2022 are to be considered for finalizing the administrative units. सेंसस होता क्या है? तो सेंसस जो है बेसिकली प्रोवाइड्स इंफॉर्मेशन ऑन साइज, डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, सोशो इकोनॉमिक, डेमोग्राफिक एंड अदर कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ अ कंट्रीज पॉपुलेशन. It was first started under British Viceroy Lord Mayo in 1872. It also helped in framing new policies, government programs to uplift areas of improvement in the community. The first synchronous census in India was held in 1881. Since then, censuses have been undertaken uninterruptedly once 10 years. हर 10 साल में एक बार सेंसस होता है तब से. अभी सेंसस जो ये करवाता कौन है? तो जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है सेंसस को कंडक्ट कराने की, the decennial census rests with the Office of the Registrar General and the Census Commissioner under the Ministry of Home Affairs. तो ये जो कुछ पॉइंट्स है ये ध्यान रखने वाले हैं कि देखिए कौन करवाता है, तो भाई किसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है? तो जो ऑफिस है किसका? रजिस्ट्रार जनरल का और सेंसस कमिश्नर का. और किस मिनिस्ट्री के अंदर आता है? तो ये आता है होम अफेयर्स के अंदर and the government of India, obviously. The census is one of the most credible sources of information on the following: demography, economic activity, literacy and education, and housing and household amenities, urbanization, fertility and morality, language and scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. मतलब हर एक एस्पेक्ट को किसी कंट्री की पॉपुलेशन के ये कवर करता है. स्पेशल प्रोटेक्शन ग्रुप SPG एक्ट, ये रिसेंटली अभी आपने देखा होगा जो पंजाब में मोदी जी की गाड़ी को रोका गया था, जो एलिज्ड ब्रीच हुई थी इन द सिक्योरिटी ऑफ द प्राइम मिनिस्टर. इट इज रिगार्डिंग दैट. तो ये है क्या? तो भाई देखिए बेसिकली व्हेन वी ये जो न्यूज है, तो जो सेंटर है इट इज प्रिपेयरिंग टू टेक एक्शंस अगेंस्ट द एयरिंग ऑफिशियल्स अंडर द प्रोविजंस ऑफ द SPG एक्ट. अब इतना सुर्खियों में तो हमारे लिए तो पढ़ना जरूरी है ही. This could detain summoning the officers responsible to Delhi or instituting a central level inquiry against them. What does the SPG Act say on PM's security? तो जो protocols हैं are set by the SPG for the PM's movement. और एक बात ये और कहता है कि Section 14 of the SPG Act makes the state government responsible for providing all the assistance to the SPG during the PM's movement. ठीक है, इसलिए ये लोग अभी स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के ऊपर एक्ट कर सकते हैं. जेनेसिस ऑफ द SPG, तो इन मार्च इन 1985, following the recommendations of a committee set up by the Home Ministry, a special unit was created for the purpose under the Cabinet Secretariat. This unit, initially called the Special Protection Unit, and was renamed as the Special Protection Group in April 1985, that is the SPG. Subsequently, the Parliament passed the Special Protection Group SPG Act, and which was notified in June 1988, यानी कि 3 साल बाद, to provide for the constitution and regulation of an armed force, है ना, for the Union, for providing proximate security to the Prime Minister of India and for matters connected therewith. Advisory for managing human wildlife conflict. Why it was in news? तो जो गवर्नमेंट है अप्रूव्स एडवाइजरी फॉर मैनेजमेंट ऑफ ह्यूमन वाइल्ड लाइफ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट अक्रॉस द कंट्रीज. अब ये एडवाइजरी है क्या? तो जो स्टैंडिंग कमिटी है ऑफ नेशनल बोर्ड ऑफ वाइल्ड लाइफ, दे हैव अप्रूव्ड द एडवाइजरी फॉर मैनेजमेंट ऑफ human wildlife conflict in the country. The advisory makes important prescriptions for the state union territories for dealing with human wildlife conflict situation and seek expedited interdepartmental coordinated and effective actions. It envisages empowering gram panchayats at the very low level in dealing with the problematic wild animals as per the section 11(1)(b) of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. It also says कि using the odd add-on average coverage under the प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा योजना. तो भाई इसके अंदर देखिए ये चीज भी आ गई है ना, प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा योजना for crop compensation against crop damage due to HWC and augmenting fodder and water resources within the forest area. The payment of a portion of ex gratia as interim relief within 24 hours of the incident to the victim or the family is provided for. देखिए, this makes the total number of critically endangered wildlife species under the recovery program for the critically endangered species to 22. ये जो जितना भी ये है, तो ये जस्ट हैव अ लुक एट दिस. तो थोड़ा ये जो टर्म्स हैं इन पे ध्यान दीजिएगा और ये जो एक्ट्स वगैरह हैं इस पे थोड़ा सा ध्यान दीजिएगा, ये थोड़ा सा इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है. वन डिस्ट्रिक्ट वन प्रोडक्ट स्कीम. सो व्हाई इट वाज इन न्यूज? तो जो फूड प्रोसेसिंग मिनिस्ट्री है, दे हैव inked an agreement with NAFED for developing 10 brands as the one district one product brands under the Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro food processing enterprise, that is PMFME scheme. On this, 6 brands have been launched recently. The 6 brands include Amrit Phal, Kori Gold, Kashmiri Mantra, Madhu Mantra, Somdana and the whole wheat cookies of Delhi Bakes. Okay. All the products will be available at NAFED, that is Nafed Bazaars, e-commerce platforms and prominent retail stores across India. About the Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro food processing enterprises, PMFME scheme ये है क्या? तो it was launched in 2020 and the scheme will be implemented for 5 years until 2024-25. It is for the unorganized sector on all India basis. इसके objectives क्या क्या है? तो increase in access to finance by micro food processing units, increasing revenues for target enterprises, enhanced compliance with food quality and safety standards, strengthening capacities of support systems, transition from the unorganized sector to the formal sector, and focus on the women entrepreneurs and aspirational districts, or encourage waste to wealth activities, and lastly focus on the minor forest produce in tribal areas. इसके सेलिंग फीचर्स यही है कि ये एक सेंट्रली स्पॉन्सर्ड एक्सपेंडिचर है टू बी शेयर्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एंड द स्टेट्स. और शेयर क्या होगा? तो ये होगा 60-40 का. 2 लाख माइक्रो एंटरप्राइजेस आर टू बी असिस्टेड विद क्रेडिट लिंक सब्सिडी. और जो बेनिफिशियरी होंगी कंट्रीब्यूशन विल बी मिनिमम 10% एंड बैलेंस फ्रॉम द लोन, एंड द सीड कैपिटल विल बी गिवन टू SHGs and that would be rupees 4 lakh per SHG for loan to members for working capital and small tools. इसमें cluster approaches भी होंगे और focused on the perishables भी होंगे. Draft National Air Sports Policy. The government has released a draft national policy for air sports. Highlights क्या है इस policy के? 2-tier governance structure होगा एक. कैसे कि जो पॉलिसी है प्रोसेस अ 2-tier governance structure for air sports in the country, which will include an apex governing body called the Air Sports Federation of India (ASFI) and the associations for each airports. अभी ASFI क्या है? तो ASFI will be autonomous body, एक autonomous body होगी है under the Ministry of Civil Aviation and will represent India at the Lausanne headquartered Federation Aeronautic International, that is FAI, and other global platforms related to airports. Functions क्या होंगे इसके? तो it will provide governance over various aspects of the airports, including regulation, certification, competitions, award, and penalties. Rules and functions of each airport association would be laid down by its safety standards for equipment and infrastructure, personnel, and training, and specify the disciplinary actions to be taken in case of non-compliance. Coverage क्या होगा इसका? तो it will be covering the activities like aerobatics, aero modeling, amateur built and experimental aircraft, ballooning, drones, gliding, hand gliding, paragliding, microlighting, paramotoring, skydiving, and vintage aircraft. Significance क्या है इस policy का? So beside the revenue from air sports activities, multiplier benefits in terms of growth in travel, tourism, infrastructure, and local empowerment, especially in hairy areas of the countries that are much greater. And creating air sport hubs across the country will bring in air sport professionals and tourists from across the world. GST compensation. Finance Ministry of several states have demanded that GST compensation scheme to be extended beyond June 2022. अब इशू क्या है? तो जो adoption है GST का, it was made possible by states ceding almost all their powers to impose local level direct taxes and agreeing to let the prevailing multiplicity of the imposed be subsumed into the GST. It was agreed on the condition that the revenue shortfalls arising from the transition to the new indirect taxes regime would be made good from a pooled GST compensation fund from a period of 5 years that is set to end in June 2022. तो ये बस यही कह रहे हैं कि भाई इसको थोड़ा सा और आगे बढ़ा दो, क्योंकि जो हमारा जो रेवेन्यू का शॉर्टफॉल है वो अभी भी चल रहा है और अभी हम लोग इस हालत में नहीं है ड्यू टू द पैंडेमिक, कीपिंग इन माइंड द करंट पैंडेमिक, हम लोग इस कंडीशन में है ही नहीं अभी कि हम अभी अपने रेवेन्यू शॉर्टफॉल्स को ठीक कर सकें. नीड फॉर द एक्सटेंशन, तो जैसा कि अभी बताया कि citing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the overall economy to and more specifically states revenue, the states including Tamil Nadu, Kerala, West Bengal, Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh stressed that while their revenues had been adversely impacted by the introduction of the GST, the hit from the pandemic had pushed back any possible rebound in revenue, especially at a time when they had been forced to spend subsequently more to address the public health emergency. अब GST compensation है क्या? तो जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है उसका जो अमेंडमेंट है हमारे जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का, कौन सा? 101st अमेंडमेंट, 101वां जो अमेंडमेंट एक्ट है was the law which created the mechanism of for levying a common nationwide goods and service tax, which states while state would receive the SGST component of the GST and a share of the IGST, that is the integrated GST. It was agreed that the revenue shortfalls arising from the transition to the new direct tax regime would be made good from the pool GST compensation. तो इसलिए 2022 जून तक जो है इसकी डेट रखी गई थी कि तब तक हम आपको कंपनसेट कर देंगे. How is the GST compensation fund funded? The corpus is funded through a composition cess that is levied on so-called demerit goods. ठीक है. अब demerit goods कौन कौन से हो गए भाई? देखिए ये aerated water, tobacco product, cigarette, पान मसाला, coal, caffeinated beverages, इन सब पे एक सेस लगाया जाता है, उससे इस फंड की भरपाई होती है. Longitudinal Aging Study of India, LASI, Wave 1 India Report. ठीक है. Why it was a news? तो Union Health Minister releases the longitudinal aging study of India, Wave 1 India report. अब ये LASI, that is last CE, longitudinal aging study of India है क्या? So it is a full-scale national survey of scientific investigation of the health, economic and social demerits and consequences of the population aging in India. ये कौन conduct कराता है? तो it was conducted undertaken by National Program for Health Care for Elderly and through the International Institute for Population Sciences. ठीक है? इसका significance क्या है? तो it is India's first and the world's largest ever survey that provides a longitudinal database for designing policies and programs for the older population in broad domains of social health and economic well-being. So basically इससे होगा ये कि ये जो ऐसे डेटाज हैं, ऐसे सर्वेज हैं, ये सब जो है ये हेल्प करते हैं काय में, पॉलिसीज को बनाने में. The evidence from LASI will be used to further strengthen and broaden the scope of National Program of Healthcare of the elderly and also help in establishing a range of preventive and healthcare programs for the older population. Mullaperiyar Dam issue. So why it was in news? So an application has been filed in the Supreme Court seeking appropriate direction to the government of Tamil Nadu to construct a new dam at as also argument the storage capacity of the Vegai Dam. तो ये जो Mullaperiyar Dam है और ये जो Vegai Dam है downstream, or to take such steps to strengthen the Mullaperiyar Dam till an alternative dam is constructed. इसकी जरूरत क्या पड़ गई? जो petitioner हैं, they have said that this is necessary to allay the fear of the millions whose lives are at risk in the event of unthinkable, namely the collapse of the Mullaperiyar Dam as a fallout, the giving away of the Idukki Dam, which is certain to cause a loss of 35 to 40 lakhs of citizens in the 5 districts of these, है ना, and may wiping out the city of the Cochin. The present issue is that both the statements are at loggerheads over the stability of the structure, with Kerala demanding that a new dam must be constructed and Tamil Nadu saying that a new structure is not needed. Also, Kerala has been against increasing water levels at the dam, citing structural stability. अब इसका सुप्रीम कोर्ट का क्या कहना है इन सब चीज़ों में? तो रिसेंटली सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने डायरेक्टेड द supervisory committee to take an immediate and firm decision on the maximum water level that can be maintained at the dam amid torrential rain in Kerala. MOC between India and Japan. Cabinet approves signing of the Memorandum of Cooperation between India and Japan on partnership in specific skilled worker. इसके डिटेल्स क्या है? तो at present memorandum of cooperation would set an institutional mechanism for partnership and cooperation between India and Japan on sending and accepting skilled Indian workers who have qualified the required skill and Japanese language test to work in 14 specification sectors in Japan. ये रहेगी 14 specific sectors जहाँ पे ये काम करने जा रहे हैं. Airtel Payment Bank is now a scheduled bank. RBI recently has announced the inclusion of the Airtel Payment Banks Limited into the second schedule to the Reserve Bank of India in 1934. इसके implications क्या है? With this, the bank can now pitch for a government-issued request for proposals and primary auctions and undertake both central and state government businesses. एक scheduled banks होता, ये scheduled banks जो हैं ये सब होते क्या हैं? तो scheduled banks in India refer to those banks which have been including in the second schedule of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934. And every scheduled bank enjoys two types of principal facilities. It becomes eligible for debts loans at the bank rate from the RBI, and secondly, it automatically requires the membership of the clearing house. Payment banks होते क्या हैं? So payment banks were established to promote financial inclusion by offering modest savings accounts and payments remittance services to migratory labor force, low-income households, small entrepreneurs, other unrecognized, unorganized sector entities, and other users. The banks can accept a restricted deposit, which is now capped at 2 lakh rupees per person, but could be raised in the future. Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme. Why it was in news? So, according to the SBI research report on this Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme, the scheme has served 13.5 lakh firms from going bankrupt and subsequently 1.5 crore jobs. And in absolute terms, MSME loan accounts worth rupees 1.8 lakh crore were saved. And almost 93.7% of such accounts are in the micro and small category. Amongst the state, Gujarat has been the biggest beneficiary, followed by Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh. इस scheme है क्या? तो scheme was basically launched as a part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan package announced in May 2020 to mitigate the distress caused by the coronavirus-induced lockdown by providing credit to different sectors, especially micro, small and medium enterprises. इसके लिए eligibility क्या चाहिए? तो in August 2020, the scheme was extended to Mudra borrowers and individual loans for business purposes. इस scheme के benefits क्या हैं? तो the scheme is expected to provide credit to the sector at a low cost nearby, enabling MSMEs to meet their operational liabilities and restart their business. By supporting MSMEs to continue functioning during the current unprecedented situation, the scheme is also expected to have a positive impact in the economy and support its rivals. Cheetah Reintroduction Project. So why it was in news? The government is preparing to translocate the first batch of 8 from the South Africa and Namibia to Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh. Soon after the situation linked to the current third wave of COVID-19 becomes normal, the total of 50 in various parks over a period of 5 years. What is next? So in this regard, the Union Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change have launched the Action Plan for Introduction of Cheetah in India, under which 50 of these big cats will be introduced in next 5 years. What is reintroduction and why reintroduce cheetah now? So reintroduction जो है of a species, that means releasing it in an area where it is capable of surviving. Reintroduction of a large carnivores have increasingly been recognized as a strategy to conserve threatened species and restore ecosystem functions.